And who's in? Alabama. Who's out? Miami. But who else is potentially pissed? Ole Miss, South Carolina. And then what's going to happen to SMU? What if they lose to Clemson? They were ranked very low for a long, long part of this season, even though they were winning games. Are they going to get bumped out? What will this look like next week after championship weekend? We shall see. Now, Ward Manuel, the leader of the College Football Playoff Committee, spoke to Reese Davis last night, and he chit-chatted about how any of these teams that aren't playing, we're going to have no more data points. So they're pretty much, congrats to Indiana.
Hell yeah.
Well done,
Congrats to Indiana. They are ranked 10th. They are in the college football playoffs. Signetti seemingly. Now, granted, there could be a whole new discussion whenever push comes to shove. This is going to be the actual first ever 12-team playoff. Maybe they'll be able to change something, or they will change something. But as it sits right now, and what Ward said last night to Reese Davis, it feels like if you're in Indiana, you're in a good spot. Notre Dame, great spot, obviously.
Yep.
Tennessee, congratulations. Ohio State, not in the Big Ten championship. Just lost to Michigan in the rivalry. Michigan fires the offensive coordinator after beating Ohio State. Ohio State, I think, very safe, very sound.
Home game.
In the college football playoff, hosting an SEC team at the Horseshoe. And then congrats to, Penn State getting in. Ladies and gentlemen, 12-year NFL vet, AQ Shipley is here. Congrats here. Penn State, look at how the microphone's perfectly placed so we don't have to see it. Yeah, well, that's that Penn State education. We'll be able to figure it out.
Oh, yeah.
Congrats to Penn State in there. Now, if they beat Oregon, I would assume that them in Oregon would get that 5-hole. 5-hole is where you want to be.
Yeah.
And I think everybody kind of knows that. They're going to have to change that for future years because shouldn't have teams eyeing the 5-hole right out of the conference championship whenever they were trying to make the conference championships more relevant than they've ever been. Need the first couple rounds to be at least home field, maybe all the way to the semifinals. We are, and I know they'll tell me, well, corporate won't agree with that, because we got these buildings and sponsors. We'll pick them up and move them.
Yeah.
I mean, what are we even talking about? I understand that, the Sugar Bowl and Fiesta Bowl are supposed to be in places, and they always have been. It's like, well, you're still in a place, and it's the semifinal. So it is still a big deal, even though you pick it up and move it. But there's going to be a lot of old heads in college ball. I think they're going to hate that. First 2 rounds need to have home field advantage because that is going to be a show. And this would be a perfect first-round lineup if you were to ask us. We got cold teams playing hot teams.
Yeah.
Bingo.
Hot teams playing cold teams. Teams from the desert taking on teams from the hills. It is a beautiful setup, and there's people pissed, which is always going to be for good conversation. The Talks the Tables here at Boston Connor and at Ty Schmidt. Con man, whenever you think about Miami, poor old Miami.
It's a damn shame.
It is, isn't it?
Truly.
Now, granted, they beat Syracuse or not, it's not. This isn't even a conversation.
Take care of business.
Because Miami had been the highest ranked ACC team the entire season.
Yeah.
That's because Cam Ward, obviously, best quarterback in the ACC. So everybody thought that team was going to go and do it. And it also felt like they had the football gods behind them in every game.
For sure.
Every game, there was some miraculous something happening. There was some review taking place in Charlotte that was coming back which way? Miami's way, every single time. So it felt like Miami was going to be the team of destiny, but they were always the highest ranked ACC team, even though SMU had been leading the ACC whenever it came to, record and everything like that. So then when Miami gets moved out all of a sudden and a 3-loss Alabama team gets put in, boy, those Miami fans, which we know.
Oh, yeah.
Bummed out.
They're loud.
They were very loud. South Carolina fans, they're mad.
Yeah, it should be.
Ole Miss fans, Lane Kiffin's tweeting this morning he's going at people.
Incredible.
The Miami athletic director gets out last night and puts out a full tweet. What are we talking about? He's not the only one that's active on there. This is the Miami athletic director on X saying, what? What are we talking about? What is this whole thing?
Respect.
Lane Kiffin, amen. Lane Kiffin this morning is like, shut up. Talking to a human who is talking about Alabama instead of Ole Miss or South Carolina. I mean, it is like, right now we're in full campaign season, but last night almost was election night.
Yes.
It feels like we kind of know what it's going to look like at this point, which is why I think everybody's pissed off.
Yeah, without a doubt. And it does feel like they got it right. Every game on there, it feels like is a banger. I think this is the college football playoff. Maybe you move some teams around. Who knows what happens with the the championship games. But SMU, that's a win and you're in. Because I don't think SMU loses the ACC and they look at SMU and say, hey, they could sneak in over Bama. Bama's going, okay? Alabama, Roll Tide, they are going to the college football playoff.
Well, that's because you're SEC ESPN.
Absolutely, which is funny just because, aside from Miami, it would be Ole Miss or South Carolina. But Miami, if maybe Cam Ward was a little higher in that Heisman race, you can make an argument, hey, we need to see that guy in the college football playoff. It's done. I'm sorry. The ACC sucks. We've been talking about this all year. The ACC stinks. No one has any respect for him. Oh. I do.
What are you saying? Georgia Tech just took Georgia to 8 overtime.
And it was awesome. But rivalry games, as we've noted, with Ohio State at 8, those are a little different when it comes to, ranking the teams, especially when you're talking about the strength of schedule, which they brought up on the broadcast. Like, hey, in previous years, strength of schedule is a thing. Strength of schedule is a thing. And I think Reese or one of the guys said, like, this is the first year strength of schedule really does matter. And that is why Alabama is in. And it would be a shame to not have Milroe and the guys on that team be in the college football playoff. Ryan Williams, dudes who can make unbelievable plays. Now, I do wonder where, like, Georgia and Penn State end up if they both lose. Just because, do they play each other then? Do they go to the 8 and 9, and then Ohio State maybe moves up to a different spot? Tennessee maybe slides into 8 and gets a home game. Like, that is where I wonder what happens. But these do feel like the teams, aside from SMU, unless they lose.
And everybody's mad about Alabama having 3 losses being in there. If Texas beats Georgia, Georgia's going to have 3 losses. They're going to be in 2.
Yeah.
So there people are going to be pissed next week, one way or the other. Let's go to South Florida, man. Ladies and gentlemen, 9-year NFL vet, host of Everything DB, Good D, Bad D, Darius J. Butler.
Yes, sir.
Miami fans not happy.
Not happy. But, I mean, coaches said all the times to players, don't leave it in the refs' hands. Handle business. Don't leave it up to a call or something. And for players for the team, you handle business. Obviously, you beat Georgia Tech. You beat Syracuse. You're not sitting in a situation. You've been sitting in that bye week slot all year long. So you handle business. You go to the ACC championship and you win it or lose it, you're in. So we didn't handle business down the stretch. So, and Ward Manuel kind of laid it out why Alabama went in over Miami with the top 25 wins and losses. So here it is right here.
Bingo.
Joining us now is the chair of the College Football Playoff Selection Committee, Ward Manuel. So, Ward, let's start with the last team in the cluster of SEC teams in Miami. What gave Alabama the edge over the rest of that group?
Well, Reese, it's good to be with you again. What it came down to is as we evaluated both teams and looked at how they rank, obviously we think highly of both teams. One's at 11, one's at 12. But what it really came down to is Alabama is 3-1 against current top 25 teams, and Miami is 0-1. Alabama is 6-1 against teams above 500, and Miami's 4-2. Both have had some losses that weren't what they wanted out of those games. But in the last 3 games, Miami has lost twice. And so for us, in evaluating their body of work, we felt that Alabama got the edge over Miami.
Well, the body of work is complete for Alabama, for Miami, for Ole Miss, for South Carolina. There's one more rankings to do. What could change? Could it change? Is it set?
Good question.
Great question.
Yes, it could change. It all depends on the outcome of these games. The commissioners have asked us to rank the top 25 through the conference championships, and that's what we intend to do.
Okay.
We have high regard, as I've said before, for those who are playing in those conference championships, and we will closely evaluate those games and the outcome of those games to rank the top 25.
Okay.
So then Reese is about to interrupt him to ask him a follow-up about everything being said if you're not playing in a championship, which we will certainly run in a matter of moments. But a lot of those stats there early. He goes 6-1 against above 500 teams. What was
3-2
or something?
Top 25.
3-1 against top 25. They were 0-1 or something like that.
Yeah, then Miami was 0-1.
And then 1-2, whatever. He was giving out like real numbers about, hey, these were presented, and this is why this happened, which is why it's good to play a hard schedule.
Exactly.
Right? So, like, there is some being taken into account about how you play against top 25 teams. Obviously, that's why Alabama is getting a spot over Miami. Mm-hmm. Once again, not Miami's fault for this being their schedule and who they got to play, who and how the teams ended up being, what the top rankings were inevitably at the end versus what they were at the time. Like, that's kind of SMU's big conversation is their losses to BYU. At the time, BYU was top 14 team. Now, BYU not even in Big 12 championship anymore, not even a thought. So, like, their loss now looks worse as the season goes on. But some of your big wins for a lot of these teams look worse as the season goes on. And then nobody thinks about what about a team getting hot late, like like Kansas, for instance. Kansas in the Big 12 has come in over the last like 3-4 weeks and been the team that we all thought they were going to be all season. So it is a win over them being projected the proper way that it should be from the beginning of the season. Whenever you think about Big 12 teams, whenever you think about ACC teams and who's supposed to be good, there's so much that is kind of contradicts each other in the conversation. And one of them is, if you're in the tournament right now and you're not in the conference championship, can anything change? And that's where this clip goes to.
Among that cluster of teams, though, and I'm not talking about all of them or not talking about UNLV or Clemson knocking someone out. Among that cluster of teams, what could happen and why could anything happen to change the order?
Well, it just depends on those who are playing in their conference championships.
But none of those teams are playing in the conference championships. You see what I'm saying? None of those teams we're talking about are playing.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yes. So those who are not playing, we will not adjust those teams because they don't have another data point, obviously. But in terms of those who are playing, how they'll move, if they'll move at all, if you remember 2 years ago, TCU lost in their conference championship game and didn't move. They stayed at 3. So we could do that, or we could adjust depending on the outcomes of the game.
So if you're not in the conference championship and you're in the playoff, you did it.
You're safe. Congrats.
That's what I just heard, right?
Yep, you made it.
There isn't any more data points. How can we change from one week to the next? I guess when push comes to shove, you could have a different conversation about the games, and if you want a different matchup, is what they could do in that room. Let's go to Hammer, Don, Ton. Everything we just chatted about, AP Tone. What is your big takeaway, and what are we not talking about enough?
Yeah, I think it was huge what he said there at the end about TCU losing their conference championship and not moving down and staying. I do think if SMU loses, and it's not a 40-point loss to Clemson, I do think SMU still will be in, because I don't think they want to set the precedent of punishing teams that made their conference championship and then are out of the playoff.
So then what does that mean?
Well, then that would mean Clemson would be in, and I think Bama's out in that situation.
Wow.
Because, listen, Ole Miss and South Carolina, they can complain, but, Ole Miss lost to Florida and Kentucky. Those losses are worse than what Bama has. And South Carolina lost to Bama and Ole Miss, so I don't know what they're arguing about. Miami, but SMU's losses will be to a ranked BYU team and obviously a ranked Clemson team in a conference championship game. I don't see them punishing SMU for they've never, I don't think, wanted to punish a team for making it to the conference championship, because obviously right now there's a lot of people talking about SMU shouldn't play because if they lose they could potentially be out of the bracket, out of the tournament. And then I think it was the data point thing. Obviously Tennessee can't jump Ohio State because those two teams are done. They don't play anymore. Alabama can't jump Notre Dame or Indiana or whatever because those teams don't play anymore. I think that was big. But I do think if SMU, if it's close, I don't know how much they can afford to lose by, but I do think SMU's in no matter
what.
I
guess Ward Manuel could say, we're not adjusting anything. SMU was ranked above Alabama. Clemson earned the first round bye with the ACC championship. So now who gets bumped out? SMU is still ranked there. Because I don't love the interviews that this Ward guy does with Reese every single week. And I appreciate Reese saying hey, we need something. Because, billions of dollars spent on this, right?
Well spent.
And that's because an amount of love and passion and conversation about the sport, which is going to happen. You guys are dictating what the end of the season looks like. You 13 people, and you are speaking for them. So we need answers, okay? And Ward's job, I guess, is to not put his foot in his mouth down the road or set any precedent in any of these things. So I appreciate him coming out and saying, hey, Indiana, you should feel okay. Ohio State, you should feel okay. Tennessee, you should feel okay. I appreciate him saying that, giving us some answer in this entire thing. I don't love that every time Reese asks him the first question, he goes, Reese, it's nice to be joining you. It's kind of like a dunk on Reese.
Yeah.
It's Reese would like to say, hey, thank you for joining us every single time, the whole song and dance. Yeah, I get it. I appreciate what he's doing there. But if SMU stays if Clemson beats them and Alabama gets dropped off, people are going to hold over and say, well, we didn't play. Why do we get knocked out? It's SMU is ranked above you to begin with. So I hope Ward Manuel doesn't get scared to answer questions going forward if somebody holds what he said right there over his head.
But then that's back to leaving it in the committee's hands. You did what you went 9-3 throughout your season, so now you're kind of at their mercy. And as far as the strength of schedule, the end of the season, I think the strength of schedule should matter much more than obviously at the beginning of the season. Because guys coming in with preseason rankings, top 10, top 15, top whatever, you get halfway through the season and you start to really figure out who these teams are. We saw it with South Carolina coming on. We saw it even with Florida kind of coming on late with Lagway and how they played for the boys down the stretch. So that's when you got a real gauge of who these teams, who these programs are.
Yeah, and good luck in there. I'm happy I'm not a member of that committee.
Amen.
I'm happy I'm not, but I appreciate the passion, and I think we're going to get phenomenal games.